Hello and welcome to today's Mini Perspectives, which will take the place of our normal full show just for a couple of days until we're back in full force next week. Well, today's Mini Perspectives covers a development that's hit the press in recent days, and this is relating to Avtar Singh Khanda. Now, of course, for those in the community will know very well, Avtar Singh Khanda was a Sikh activist, a Khalistani, who died under very suspicious circumstances a couple of years ago in June 2023. And there has been a slight development in this hit the press, and it's been widely reported, in various different angles, but ultimately the development relates to the barrister Michael Polak, who has been representing the family of Avtar Singh Khanda, who's been working like a real trooper behind the scenes just to try and drum up not just the interest from a political perspective and a legal perspective, but also just to start gathering more and more evidence, because he's pushing very hard for a judge-led inquiry to investigate what actually happened to Avtar Singh Khanda. Now, Avtar himself, he was only a young lad, he was 35, he died in June, only 4 days after being admitted to hospital in Birmingham here in the UK, when allegedly he was feeling unwell, and the official cause of death, he passed away literally within days. And the official cause of death on his death certificate was written down as acute myeloid leukemia. This is sort of a form of blood cancer. And this is despite the fact that he was seemingly in perfectly good health all the time leading up to those few days before he was admitted into hospital. And Michael Polak has actually recently written a letter to the West Midlands coroner, a lady called Louise Hunt. And it's this letter that has been released to the press, so that presumably by Michael Polak himself, just to try and bring a bit of attention to this case to help his case through. And it said in his letter, it said samples were not tested, his blood samples in the post-mortem were not tested for nerve agents, biological agents or nuclear agents, which could have brought about an aggressive cancer. And Michael Polak urged her to reverse the previous decision not to open an inquest into his death, because, of course, when he died, there was a lot went on, and a lot didn't go on that should have happened. And it was very clear to even objective observers that his death was very quickly buried, hushed up, moved on. The process was accelerated, and the normal protocols into a suspicious death were not followed. And this is why so many people are very suspicious of what actually happened, and they believe that even the British state are somehow involved in some sort of cover-up. Now, of course, his death occurred at a very, very suspicious time in itself. It occurred during what was going on at the time. This was in the backdrop of India's involvement in what was known to be an international campaign of transnational oppression. We do know that Hardeep Singh Nijjar over in Canada was murdered, I think it was a day or two just before his death. There was another Khalistan campaigner in Pakistan who died or was murdered round about the same time. And it's a little bit suspicious that Avtar Singh Khanda, a well-known Khalistani activist, died under suspicious circumstances at the same time. Yet, despite all this obviously suspicious context, no normal protocol was followed to investigate his death. It was brushed up as just a simple death from myeloid leukemia, which in itself was, it smacked of suspicion. And now, at the time, the West Midlands police, who were the presiding police force, said there was no reason to suspect foul play in his case, which again flies in the face of the context of what was going on at the time. But Michael Polak's letter to the coroner included a witness statement from Jas Singh. Now, Jaswinder Singh, he was a friend of Khanda, and he's also an advisor to the Sikh Federation UK. And West Midlands Police had confirmed to him in a meeting last year that the police investigation did not include reviewing Avtar's phones, laptop, talking to his friends, co-workers, searching his home address, or considering information about attacks on Sikh activists around the world. In other words, the most blindingly obvious normal things to do in a case like this, where somebody dies under very suspicious circumstances in a very, very suspicious context, where others like him have been murdered, clearly murdered by gunfire, then why didn't they follow normal protocol, normal procedures, and just basic investigations like reviewing his devices, talking to his friends, getting a little bit of context around his death? They didn't do this. The big question is, why didn't they do this? Very suspicious in itself. And of course, at the time and since then, many people have said they believe that from on high, instructions had been received, political instructions on high to West Midlands Police, leadership management, to saying, we do not want you to investigate this case because it could be embarrassing for the UK, embarrassing for India, and likely under pressure from India itself. Now, Michael Polak, the barrister, his letter included the report from a consultant forensic pathologist. He's actually he's employed a forensic pathologist to look into this, to investigate this. In other words, he's got an expert to look at this case. And this is a Dr. Ashley Fagan-Earl. And Dr. Fagan-Earl was provided with Khanda's death certificate, his hospital notes, and a toxicology report. And so he's had not very much to go on, unfortunately, because obviously very hard to get evidence when he's been dead and buried for 2 years now. How convenient for the state. Consideration, as he said, should be given as to whether the deceased could have been exposed to substances that may result in the development of an acute leukemia, Polak said. In other words, basically he's saying he's instructed the toxicologist, the expert, to say, look, is there any possibility that he could have been murdered based on what you can uncover here? Now, Fagan-Earl, the toxicologist, said, and he noted that toxicological analysis in hospital did not provide any unusual results in this case, but he said the limitations of such analysis must be borne in mind. And that is an important statement that he just made. And before describing how not all poisons leave behind them a defined clinical signature, and how some toxins require specialist testing to detect. And he added that he made no criticism of the toxicology that's been carried out in this case, but hope that the above highlights that a negative drug screen does not mean that a poisoning cannot be completely excluded, particularly with the use of more exotic substances that are not frequently encountered. And he added that he has been involved with a number of cases where there has been suspicion of poisoning by unusual agents. One case required extremely specialised testing at Kew Gardens. 2 other cases involved potential poisoning by foreign powers. As he said, these involved the use of multiple experts above and beyond the normal expertise of toxicologists, including expertise from Porton Down. Porton Down is our government centre who specialise in poisons, chemical warfare. Basically the best in the country, the best minds in the country are based at Porton Down, and they get heavily involved. They are the ultimate experts in this country on toxicology. So in the past, where there has been suspicion of poisoning by foreign states, Porton Down gets involved because they're really the only people who have the genuine expertise to identify a potential poison. And as Fagan-Earl, the toxicologist, finally said, there are some poisons that can only be identified if they are suspected. So his report actually, on the face of it, says, well, I couldn't find anything, but what really matters here, he's saying it is likely that a foreign state that wanted to murder somebody is going to use a poison that will then not be readily detected under normal tests. And of course, Avtar Singh Khanda, if indeed he was murdered by India, by the Indian state, they're not going to use a toxic substance that is going to appear in a normal test. Of course they're not. They don't do that. They're not stupid. They are going to use a poison that could only ever be detected if it is specifically looked for by experts who are capable of finding that evidence. Those tests were not carried out in the case of Avtar Singh Khanda. One has to ask why. We can all draw our own conclusions why Avtar Singh Khanda was not tested post-mortem for these poisons. We know why, really, is because the government, the West Midlands Police, as their tools, are afraid of what they would probably find. We all know in the diaspora, in the Sikh community, that Avtar Singh Khanda was probably murdered, like Hardeep Singh Nijjar, like many others, by the Indian state, by agents of the Research and Analysis Wing of India, the Indian Intelligence Agency. That is the most likely thing that happened with Avtar Singh Khanda. So why on earth was any investigation not carried out? Why were no proper toxicology tests carried out on his blood? One has to ask that question, and it stinks, frankly. This is why Michael Polak, as the barrister for the family, is calling for this judge-led inquiry, so that a judge who has the power to witness and see intelligence information that the public would not normally be allowed to see, but a judge would be authorised, he would be cleared to be able to have access to intelligence information from MI6, from MI5, our intelligence services here in the UK, and then can report the likelihood that Avtar Singh Khanda was indeed a victim of the Indian state. Now, likely, and again, I talk about a lot of this context, we do know that in the weeks before Khanda's death, he was being followed. His mother and sister had been detained by authorities searching for Amritpal Singh in the Punjab. And we do know that Avtar himself, had received threats to life after, and this is again a pretty ridiculous situation, there was a campaign that accused him. There was a protest in London outside the High Commission, the Indian High Commission, where he was singled out by Indian media and the Hindutva squads online as being an individual who ripped down the Indian tricolour at the Indian High Commission in London. It wasn't him. That was absolute nonsense. It was false information. But he was identified by Hindutva on social media and therefore reported by the Indian mainstream media, and he was then made a target because of that false accusation. And lo and behold, just a short while after, a few weeks after that accusation, he finds himself dead, suspicious or what. So, as Jagjit Singh, he's Khanda's next of kin, said, and quoted, "We want answers. How did Avtar die amidst all these threats? If it was Russia or Iran involved rather than India, this investigation would have been a whole different scale. Too many questions remain unanswered. And West Midlands Police have been approached by mainstream media, including the Guardian newspaper, Birmingham and Solihull Coroner's Office, and they all said they were unable to comment on specific cases." How very convenient. So we will not, as a channel, let this lie. We will not let the death of Avtar Singh Khanda go unmarked. We ourselves will keep the pressure on. We will keep reporting on this, and we will give absolute full support to Michael Polak and his legal team, who are still pursuing this on behalf of Avtar Singh Khanda's family. We wish them the very best of luck. We will keep reporting on it, and anything that comes up, of course, we will be here first to report on it. But as I say, the whole thing stinks. It looks like there's been a British establishment cover-up. The whole thing is very, very suspicious. It is very likely that Avtar Singh Khanda was murdered by the Indian state. All we need now is just to uncover that proof. Well, there you go. That was Many Perspectives for another day. Do stay tuned. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But until next time, it's a goodbye from me. We'll see you tomorrow.